So let's talk about fractions, decimals, and percentages. First of all, these are all interrelated topics. So if I give you a decimal, you can turn it into a percent. If I give you a fraction, you can turn it into a percent. If I give you a percent, you can turn it into either decimal or fraction. So that's what we're going to practice on this slide. Um, Please take a moment to pause the video, fill in as many of these blanks as you can, and when you're ready, unpause so you can see all the answers. All right, so hopefully you paused and you had a chance to look this over. Whenever you convert from a decimal to a percentage, you want to take that decimal place and move it 2 places to the right. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to get 89%. For 2.8, I want to move it 2 places to the right. Hey, that decimal is like there's not a number after the 8. That's okay. I'm just going to put a 0 there. So this is 280%. The decimal is not shown, so it's after the 12 here. And if I move it 2 places to the right, I have to put in 2 zeros. Well, that's what I get. It's 1200%. And finally, the last question, if I move that decimal 2 places to the right, I still have 1 0 left, and I'm going to show that 0.097%. Do not forget to use your percent symbol because that's what tells the person who's reading what you wrote that you have moved the decimal over like that. Okay, let's do it the other way. 52% is 0.52. And by the way, it does not matter if you write the 0 or if you just write 0.52. Those mean exactly the same thing. 560%, I'm moving that decimal 2 places to the left, so it's going to end up here between the 5 and the 6. So that's a multiplier of 5.6. 0.05%, do not be tricked in moving it to the right. You're still moving it to the left, which means we're going to have to put in 2 more zeros. So 0.3 zeros before your 5. And finally, 13% is 0.13. Okay, now let's talk about fractions. Hey, I recommend certain ones that you just memorize. Certainly, you can always calculate it. You can use your calculator, right? And on your calculator, you would do the way I would write it is 1 divided by 2 equals, and your calculator would tell you 0.5, and then you would move your decimal 2 places to the right and get 50%. Hey, I hope you never do that. I hope you look at 1/2 and you just know. 1/2 is 50%. That is going to make you faster and it is worth it. So certain things that happen so much are totally worth memorizing. For instance, if your calculator tells you 0.3333 and it kind of goes to the end of the screen, they're talking about 1/3 or they're talking about 33%. I hope you know 1/4 is 25% and 1/8 is half of that. That's 12.5%. It's worth remembering that number as well. It comes up quite a bit. Or the decimal equivalent is right, 0.125. 1/5. I use this all the time when I'm grading a quiz that only has 5 questions. Every question is worth 20 points if it's a 100-point quiz. So if you get only 2 right, that's going to be a 40%. 3 right is a 60%. 4 right is an 80%. Of course, if you get all 5 right, that's your 100%. And I think the fractions with 9 are interesting. If you use your calculator and you do 1 divided by 9 equals, you'll get 0.111, and it'll just go to the end of your screen. They're saying that's 0.1 repeating. So typically we will round that to 11.11%. 2/9 will work the same way. That's 22%. 3/9 is 33%. No surprise because 1/3 and 3/9 are equal to each other. 4/9 is 44%. Right. Be careful. I really should have a 5/9 here. 5/9 is equal to 0.5 repeating, right? So if you're going to round that to a whole number, you're going to round that 5 up to a 6. So normally at this point, we're not going to say 55. We would say 56%. And 6/9, we would say 67% instead of 66 because of the rounding. All right, so there we go. Be very quick and practice and just know these guys like the back of your hands. Yes, you can calculate them, but it's it happens so often, it's just worth it to know exactly what the answers are going to be without even doing calculation. All right, now let's talk about when you do have to calculate and when you have these word problems on the SAT that use these skills. So I'm going to give you a few problems. Um, First, there's certain key words, and if you watched our strategy video, I was talking about keywords. Well, here are the big ones. Is. All right, that looks like a word you're going to see a lot, but when you see it, is a very important word in a math problem. you should fill in an equals when you see an is, right? And in harder questions, sometimes a verb will not be is, but it's still the equals, like has, provides, or preferred. All of those could be an equal sign in a math word problem. When you see of, that means multiply. And usually, in a word problem, I'm going to use the letter X as a variable. So I don't like to use an X for multiplication because then it looks like it's a variable. So usually for multiply, I put that number in parentheses. And that's the easiest way for it to know that I'm multiplying two things in an equation. Always convert percentages to decimals when you're working with them in an equation. And pay attention to the difference between if a question says P% or just P, or sometimes R. Remember, I think we looked at a question like this before. If R is 0.15, that means P is 15%. You might see 0.15 and 15 both as answer choices. If the question says P%, they want the 15. They don't want the 0.15. All right, with those tips, let's try it out on some real questions. Here are your first two. Please pause the video, take a minute to try them. All right, I hope you have paused it because I am now going to be giving away the answers. Let's do them together. For the first question here, 720 is 80% of what number? We are going to word for word just turn this question into an equation. So 720, the is your equals. 80% means write it as a decimal, 0.8 of. That means multiply the next thing, right? So I'll use parentheses for that. And what number? Well, there's my variable. So I'll call that x. So there you go. I didn't change the order at all. And now I have an equation to solve. 720 equals 0.8x. I'm going to divide both sides by 0.8. So on your calculator, type in 720 divided by 0.8, and you should get 900. And your answer is C. Okay, let's try number 2. 50.4 is P% of 84. What is the value of P? Again, we're just going to go word for word. 50.4 is equals P%. I'm going to write that as R because I know that my equation will give me a decimal, and I need to convert that to a percent for my final answer of 84. Okay, so 50.4 equals 84 times R. Let's divide both sides by 84. And my calculator tells me that is 0.6, right? But be careful, the answer is not B. That's the decimal equivalent. Percentage is 60%. That's why I changed letters to remind myself not to stop at the 0.6. My answer here is D. Okay. Let's give it one more try. I have another question. Oh, I have another 2 questions for you. Please pause the video and try them for yourself. All right, now that you've tried these questions, let's do them together. We have 600 batteries that were tested, 60% were charged. I cannot, because of the way this is written, I can't go with the words in the exact same order, but I can write the question myself in a simpler way. What they're asking is, what is 60% of 600? Now that I see it that way, now I can follow the words in their order. So what, that's my X, is 60%, 0.6 of 600 times 600. Well, I don't have to solve it all. I just have to multiply 600 times 0.6, and my calculator will tell me that's 360, and that is our answer here. All right, now let's try number 4. If A is 50% of B and B is 90% of C, what percent of C is A? Oh, this is the most involved of the questions we've seen yet, but we can do it. A is 50% of B. Here's my first equation. A is 50% of B times B. And I have another equation. Let me use a different color for that one. B is 90% of C. B is 90%, 0.9 of C times C. Okay. And the question is, what percent of C is A? Let me get another color for that. So what I have to do is get an equation with only C and A. I've got to get B out of the picture. I'm going to do that through substitution. So I know that B equals 0.9C. I can rewrite the first equation, but when I get to B, I'm going to substitute in 0.9C instead. So I'll say A equals 0.5 times 0.9C. The 0.5 is still there, right? And now I'm going to multiply my 0.5 and my 0.9. A equals 0.45C. And I would look at this and be careful. I want to make sure that I'm answering the question correctly. So I would say A is 45% of C. What percent of C is it? Yeah, I got that right. It's 45%. Answer here is B.